opportunity to bring together candidates and industry leaders for focused conversation on the issues. I want to thank each of the candidates for participating. We have 11 on the stage. Shanna Bellows has not made it yet. But we're running a structured format. Maybe that's 12. It's so many. I can barely see you. They're so far away. We're going to be running a strict clock. You'll notice a yellow card during the main question portion of the event, which signals candidates have 30 seconds remaining, and the candidates can see that down there. The red card will indicate when time has expired and remarks should be concluded. We'll begin with opening statements where each candidate will have 30 seconds to introduce themselves and set the stage for their campaign to tell us who they are. From there, we will go to the main question segment. Candidates will have 90 seconds to respond. Rebuttals will be limited and at my discretion. Given the size of the field, we won't be opening up extended exchanges, but we may allow a brief follow-up where it's helpful to clarify a point. And we'll begin with the questions on this end and cycle through so nobody gets to go first or last all of the time. We'll also have a lightning round, which candidates will be able to give yes or no answers and take about 15 seconds to explain why. And then each will have 45 seconds for their closing remarks. I want to note the legislature is currently in session. A couple of our candidates have obligations there and may need to step out before the forum concludes. So if they disappear, don't judge them harshly for that. And we will ask the candidates to be mindful of the time limits so we can keep things moving. And with that, we begin with our little introductory statements, and we start with Rick Bennett.
Thank you. It's great to be here. My name is Rick Bennett. I live in Oxford. My wife of 35 years. I'm a businessman and a state senator, and so I am one of the ones that will have to leave at 9 o'clock. I'm running as an independent for governor. I have to leave at 9 o'clock because the legislature's in its last 2 weeks. We've got lots of bills, much of which are affecting this organization and all of you, one of which is the data privacy bill, which is unfortunately coming out and is likely to be enacted. And it's being done on the backs of small businesses and people in this room, while the fact is that the political parties have exempted themselves from the same rules that they want to impose on all of you. So I need to get up there to fight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I would point out Shanna Bellows says she is unable to make it today, and she sends her regrets that she cannot be with you all today. Up next is Ben Midgley.
Okay, 30 seconds is a quick one. So I'm Ben Midgley, grew up in the state here. My family grew up here. A quick history is never made it out of college, spent time on unemployment, food stamps, eventually rose up through the business industry. I created a company called Crunch Fitness Franchising after being the president of Planet Fitness, grew that to 500 locations in 46 states and 6 countries. It had 3 million members, did over $1 billion of revenue, and created 15,000 jobs. One date that sticks out to me, which I'm sure you all will remember, is March 15th, 2020, where restaurants, bars, and gyms were shut down nationally. I had to go through shutting down 300 plus locations in all those states and go through the reopening process. Restart billing for 3 million members, and get business back in line like you all had to go through the COVID as well. It's a very tricky situation. I've seen how businesses are supported in certain states and how businesses aren't. States that support businesses do much better. States that don't support businesses do much worse. I apologize. I had 5 seconds left. In any case, Maine needs to do a better job supporting business.
Up next, is Jonathan Bush.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jonathan Bush. I'm a father of 7 great Americans who would like to be Mainers, but they like to have careers and the American dream and the ability to participate in business. So we'll have to help them with that. I'm a veteran. I'm an entrepreneur who started my own business in my basement and grew it up to 900 jobs in Maine. I think I'm the only one of the... It's good to see that there are more people in the audience than on the stage here. It's a good one for us candidates. That has brought that and has a playbook for doing that. I believe that Maine has worked its way up to the top of every list you don't want to be on if you want to grow, and the bottom of every list you have to top, and we need to reverse that and become a really business-friendly state.
Next is Nirav Shah.
Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nirav Shah. I'm the former Maine CDC director during the height of the pandemic, after which I then went on to serve in the Biden administration. I've come back and I'm now running for governor to make sure that Maine families have everything they need to thrive and survive. I want to pick up on what Senator Bennett mentioned, which is the ways in which Maine state government has often worked in opposition to the business community. And as governor, I pledge that I will stand shoulder to shoulder with the business community to march forward rather than trying to stymie it at every turn, including on data privacy and data minimization, which I oppose.
Next up is Hannah Pingree.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hannah Pingree. I am one of the candidates for governor. I was born in Belfast, grew up on an offshore island. I have spent nearly 25 years in public service, the youngest woman in the country to be Speaker of the House. I've chaired my local school board and worked for almost the last 7 years on the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future, working on issues like housing and workforce and climate. I've also spent probably more than 25 years in the hospitality industry. I washed dishes, waited tables, and helped run several family businesses in and restaurants. So I'm excited for this conversation, and thank you again for having me.
Now, Garrett Mason.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Garrett Mason. I'm from Lisbon Falls, Maine, the Moxie capital of the world. And when you think about Lisbon Falls, I hope you'll come the second weekend of July, which is when Moxie Festival weekend is, which so many of you have been involved with before. But I believe that hospitality and tourism is a key economic driver for the state and can be used as an economic development tool to lift all segments of our economy. And I'm excited to talk to you about why I think that today. So thank you. If you'd like to learn more, go to masonformaine.com.
Next, Owen McCarthy.
My name's Owen McCarthy. I grew up in the shadow of Mount Katahdin in a town called Patton, Maine, the son of a third-generation logger and a second-generation lunch lady. I was the first in my family to go to college on the Pulp and Paper Scholarship at the University of Maine and worked in the paper industry. I then became an entrepreneur. I started a company called Med Rhythms, raised $60 million of capital into the state, created jobs here. I'm a husband and a father to Oliver and Theodore, and I don't think they have the same opportunity I have coming from Maine. And I think if you're a working class Mainer, we've made this state unaffordable, and that's why I'm running for governor. Thank you.
Next to him is Bobby Charles.
So I'm Bobby Charles. I grew up in a small town of 500, Wayne. Went away to get an education. My father never got through college, but Dartmouth, Oxford University in economics, Columbia Law School, and then served my country for 10 years, Navy intelligence. Was a 5-year investigator, federal investigator of fraud, and then spent time working. I run a company for 25 years and was Assistant Secretary of State to Colin Powell, managing billions of dollars of programs, trained police around the world, including setting up all the Iraqi police. Came back here to Maine and felt like we really need some help here, so that's why I stepped up.
Next is Ed Crockett.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Ed Crockett. I'm running for governor as an independent. I've served the last 8 years in the Maine legislature, in the House, and I look forward to getting back up to Augusta as soon as this is over. I'm a lifelong Mainer, lifelong Portlander. I've spent my whole career, which is 45 years now, in the food and beverage industry. This industry is near and dear to me, and my intention is to support it every step of the way.
Next is David Jones.
How you doing? My name is David Jones. I'm running to be governor of the state of Maine. Married. I have, to my wife Nancy, 40 years. I have 6 children, 8 grandchildren. We all live here in Maine, and I was raised by a waitress, a bartender. So I've been around the hospitality industry my entire life, whether I wanted to or not. I own F.O. Bailey Real Estate. It's Maine's oldest continuous running company. I've sold many tracts of land here along Maine Mall Road. My client owns probably most of the hotels along this way. Pretty well versed in the industry, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that the #1 business here in the state of Maine is absolutely supported by the governor.
And finally, Troy Jackson.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Troy Jackson. I live in Allagash. I'm a 5th-generation logger, and I know for a fact that the government doesn't do enough for tourism. We don't put enough money into tourism. And the next governor, whoever it is, needs to be someone that promotes it a lot more. I've seen my time. We've tried to put money into the snowmobile fund. We've tried to put money in ATV. We've tried to put more money into the tourism fund. And it's been stymied time and time again. I know that tourism is our biggest attraction, puts more money in the economy than anything. And we have to do that in the future because it is something that's very important. And it's probably the biggest attraction, and the next governor has to make sure that they're out there stumping, being a cheerleader every day of the week, because it's probably the biggest thing that we can do to promote more economic opportunity in the state.
Thank you all. We're going to begin with our questions now, and a reminder, you'll have 90 seconds to answer each of these questions, and keep an eye on the yellow and red cards. The yellow means 30 seconds, and red is to wrap up. So to begin, tax competitiveness. Maine's tourism industry supports more than 116,000 jobs and welcomes more than 15 million visitors each year. The state's current tax rates that mostly directly hit visitor industries are 8% on prepared food, 9% on lodging, 5.5% on general sales. Separately, Maine's overall state and local tax burden ranks high nationally, and businesses are also watching debates over property tax-related programs. Our question is this: when the state has proposed lowering the state budget or increasing taxes, lawmakers have looked to changes in the meals and lodging tax, sales tax, or income taxes to make a desired budget work. What is your tax strategy to keep Maine competitive for visitors and businesses while maintaining year-round affordability? And we'll begin with Ben Midgley.
Yeah, Maine is one of the highest tax states in the country with one of the lowest average incomes. It's one of our big disadvantages, and certainly on the corporate tax side right now it's 8.95%, and there's legislation in place to raise that. The taxes that the hospitality industry has to pay also support the, I believe it's the Maine Tourism Association, and that's supposed to use that money, at least 5% of that money, to market, to drive more tourism into the state. The promotion could be increased and should be increased as volume has been down the last few years, so we want to make sure there's more money dedicated to that. You need all the help you can get to get more folks into the state. Structurally, the state right now has a number of challenges with the tax system. We are in a state where we're not supporting the economic growth of businesses. We have 0 jobs forecasted, or job growth through 2029, that's the economic forecast. That's no way to stimulate the economy. Ideally, what you want is to have corporations paying lower taxes, individuals paying lower taxes, while both are earning more. In that situation, the state will make more money as well. When we did tax cuts in 2011 and 2015, the state actually makes more money by doing that.
Next is Jonathan Bush.
Yeah, this is a crisis. I ended the intro with top of the list of everything you don't want to do and the bottom of the list of everything you need to be the top of. Our playbook is clear in my mind. We need to cut our taxes urgently. The Betty is an example of, people in business passing a straw around as the water is going to creep over their head to survive, as opposed to actually having a base environment that is affordable, where the base tax load is low. Ben pointed out, 5th highest tax load in the country for the 5th poorest state in the country is an unsustainable norm. And so we need to cut our taxes by $1 billion across the board. Not a little group of lobbyists doing a little group of things for a little group of people, but across the board, $1 billion, $2,000 per Maine family, as well as businesses. The second thing we need to do is audit how we got here. We have doubled the size of the state budget during one administration. That is an astonishing accomplishment. I don't know how they were able to pull that off, but it must be rolled back. So an audit of every function in Augusta and a prune back of every program. Narrow the focus, automate what's left, and then move the rest of the work into the open economy. Once we've done that, once we've focused and we've pruned back, beat back the bloat in Augusta, we can then begin to bring economy back into the places where Augusta was crowding us out. In healthcare and in numerous other sectors, badly run state bureaucracies are crowding out well-run, beautiful businesses that deliver care and other services more cheaply. In retail, we have this, and in tourism, every other place. If we beat back Augusta and make space for our economy, it will be filled.
Thank you, Jonathan. Nirav Shah.
Great. Thank you for this question. I, too, find that Maine's tax burden is incredibly and unsustainably high. We all feel it when whether we have to pay our property taxes, income taxes, or the other taxes we see on any bill anytime we go out. And so I, too, would like to find ways to lower Maine's overall tax burden. That said, right now, Mainers are also struggling. 1 in every 5 kids in Maine doesn't have enough to eat. Healthcare in Maine is crumbling. Women in rural Maine can't find themselves to a birthing center so they can actually have and start a family. And so right now, my priority is making sure that Maine families have what they need. To the extent we think about tax cuts in the long term, I would like to do so, but we also then have to couple that discussion with what parts of our budget we are going to cut. And right now, the needs that we have, because of how many Maine families are struggling, are quite significant. So my view is then the question is, how do we actually generate the revenue that the state of Maine needs to take care of families in need? And for me, that revenue generation will only come from growth in the long term, attracting more folks to come to Maine, attracting additional businesses to come to Maine. Maine is hot, and a lot of folks want to move here. But in addition to improving the tax climate, there's a lot we can do to improve the overall business climate of Maine. We've already referenced, for example, the data privacy bill. Business exemptions are another one. There are a number of other ways that we can improve the overall business climate and grow our economy, and thus grow our tax revenues.
Hannah Pingree.
As I travel around the state of Maine, I do hear a lot, especially about property taxes right now. And people also want a positive business environment in which it is easier to start and run a business. I do think some of it comes back to taxation. I absolutely think that people need property tax relief right now. And I'm a supporter of progressive taxation. I actually think that moderate and low-income Mainers are paying too much of their income in taxes right now. But when I travel around, and I'm sure that many of you in this room would agree, the issues I hear the most about, especially from businesses, are workforce. And they talk about the issue of housing and childcare. They cannot find enough workers. And I don't disagree with Nirav. Our number one focus needs to be growing the economy. As the oldest state in the country, we need to be a state that is welcoming to young people, that is encouraging more people to move here. And what do we need to do? We need to have a lot more housing that young people can afford. I grew up in an offshore island where young people cannot afford to buy a house. Our boatyard, our school can't find workers because there's nowhere to rent. That's the case in nearly every community in Maine right now. So investing in the housing and the childcare that allows workers to settle where we have so many jobs going unfilled, that needs to be the top priority of the next governor.
Garrett Mason.
Well, thank you so much for the question, Pat. I think that, when I look back on my time in the legislature from 2010 to 2018, I think one of the greatest things that we did was we removed 70,000 low-income tax filers off the tax rolls completely. We reduced Maine's income tax in both 2011 and 2015, and what that did was it grew the economy. And because of that, it was able to grow businesses like yours all across the state. I think so much of what we have to do is not only create more jobs, but invest in the people who are already here so that they can grow, and that means that less taxation across the board. So I am firmly for lowering tax rates, not only for individuals, but for corporations. And the best way that we can do that is to cut the state budget. The state budget has grown almost by double since 2018. That is completely unsustainable and not anything that we can continue to accept. I think the other issues that will help in this election, all of these businesses and organizations that you all represent, are the same issues that are affecting everyday Mainers. The affordability crisis is real. Housing is too expensive. Energy is too expensive. We all pay an energy bill. If we can reduce the cost of living in Maine, it will lift everybody up. And those are the things that I'll be focused on as governor, because when we do that, we can lower the overall tax burden for everybody. And one small additional thing that I'd like to say is we have to stop sweeping various funds to fund other government programs. You guys pay the taxes that you charge, are required to charge by the state. You have to make sure that those monies stay in the tourism fund, because that's how you grow your businesses.
Thank you, Garrett. Owen McCarthy.
So I have an Uncle Thumb, and a couple weeks ago, my friend Jonathan Bush quoted my Uncle Thumb. So I've been waiting to quote his Uncle George Bush and say no new taxes. I released a plan, Maine 2040, which is built to lead again, all betting on opportunity, affordability, and discipline in how we run the government. It's on my website, it's 70 pages. In that, I make the case, like we both need to fix the fundamentals on how the government operates, and we need to bet on our strengths. In fixing the fundamentals, it calls for a 10% income tax cut immediately, and to phase it out over the 8 years of the administration. And I know this has been talked about before in the past, but why it is imperative now is because of the growth of remote work out there. There's 8 states with no income tax. There's soon to be 11, and we're in an arms race, and we're not going to attract people in if we're not competitive from a taxation perspective. We also need to freeze property taxes on seniors and comply on the federal tax regulations, no tax on tips and no tax on overtimes. To do that, we need to be disciplined, which is another chapter in the book about how we run the government. So thank you.
Bobby Charles.
So I think tax cuts are obviously central. Property taxes are the #1 item, and I would say income tax cuts are the #2 item. Very specifically, the business equipment tax reimbursement, which the Democrats just voted to stop, needs to continue. The paid family medical leave mandates need to be repealed. There are two bills in right now. One is 405, one is 539. They are drowning, as NFIB and Maine Municipal would tell you. They are drowning small businesses right now. I think we need to go back to no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. At the end of the day, this industry is, well, I say this industry, tourism, and together with hospitality, represents 20% of the income of this state, 116,000 jobs, 17% of the workforce. We obviously have to rebuild the workforce and get it back here. That'll be trades in schools. That'll be a lot of other pieces of the equation to get our schools back in business and to incentivize hard work, including everybody able-bodied from 18 to 65 that are childless. They need to be, if they're going to get Maine care, they've got to be working at least 20 hours a week. And last, I'll just say that this state is really encumbered by the fact that we have an anti-business climate, and it is the Democrats that have delivered that, and I am unreserved about saying we need to rebuild a pro-growth, pro-business climate, period.
Ed Crockett.
Thank you, Pat. I'm glad we're leading off with this question because I've had the privilege of serving on the Taxation Committee for the last 4 years. And one of the things that we always have to keep in mind when we're dealing with taxes is that in the state of Maine, the budget has to be balanced. So as Dr. Shaw said earlier, it is a bit of a give and take when we're looking at tax relief. However, we have enormous opportunity to have tax relief specifically with property tax. I think it was, and that mentioned seniors. I mean, 25% of our population in the state of Maine is 65 years and older. We need to take care of them. Income tax fairness. There is a bill, LD 229, that is currently on the legislature. It was also in the legislature in 131st 2 years ago. It's a revenue neutral income tax adjusting the brackets. It's a good bill. We couldn't even get it to the governor last year because appropriations just wouldn't move it forward. And I think that has a lot to do with the governor's commitment not to raise any taxes, even though this one was a revenue neutral bill. We need something like that to move forward. I just heard last night that the Appropriations Committee passed eliminating the Better program. That is absolutely a horrible idea. And I'm looking forward to make sure I vote against that if it makes it into the final budget. And of course it passed on party lines, which has unfortunately been the case over the last 4 years in the Maine legislature.
I'm going to have to wrap you up on that, Ed. Next is David Jones.
Well, simple. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. We have to make the trade attractive to young people. We're losing people. They're leaving the state because they cannot get jobs. I talk to a lot of people that own hotels. I hear all the time, workforce housing. I can't keep people. People don't have any place to stay. You know, the regulations on this industry are absolutely insane. And we have to stop this. I mean, you know, government, to me, is the problem, not the answer. All right? So, you know, if we can deregulate and eliminate the obstacles for everybody in this room that's in this industry, you know the rules. You know how they affect you. These rules cost money. These regulations cost you money. And if we don't get to the point where it makes sense, you know, for the people, the young people to stay, you know, we have to really look at our Maine care program. We've got 400,000 people in the state of Maine. That's almost 1/3 of our population on Maine care. Why don't we do workfare for welfare? Why can't these people work? If they're able-bodied, able-minded, you know, the first thing I want to do as governor is make sure we have everyone that's on Maine care reapply. I want them to reapply and prove that they really should be on Maine care. And if they are able-bodied and able-minded, they could be working in this industry. They could be bussing tables. They could be washing dishes. They could be doing chambermaids. There's things that have to be done. And, you know, people today just are not motivated to work. And because government has made it that way. They've made it attractive to not work. When I grew up in this industry with my mom and dad, I'm telling you, you did everything you could to make a buck. It has to come back, and we have to go back to that today.
Thank you, David. Troy Jackson.
Well, it's interesting to hear people talk about the budget exploding and things like that, and supporting income tax cuts, because those income tax cuts were paid for on the backs of property taxpayers. $400 million coming out of revenue sharing that actually was restored by us, and that's part of what increased the budget. EMS services, things like that I'm sure all of you wanted whenever you picked up the phone, called 911. Those were what blew up our property taxes, paying for income tax cuts for the wealthiest people in the state. So no, I'm not going to support income tax cuts for wealthy people in the state. I didn't then, and I won't in the future. I will support property tax cuts because that is something that has been really bothering people up and down the state. It's something that's making it hard for people to live in the state. That is something I will do and I plan on doing. And so that will be what my focus will be once again, is property tax cuts for people in Maine, not income tax cuts. I never have supported that, and I'm not going to support it in the future, and I'm being very blunt and honest with you right now. Because I've never had anyone come up to me and say, hey, you know what, I really need an income tax cut. I've had a lot of people ask me to help them with property taxes because that is something that has been a real issue.
And Rick Bennett.
Thank you, Pat. I think the question of tax equity is a real one. We've had the same system basically in place for decades now, and it's had people try to nibble around the edges, but it hasn't had a comprehensive review on that. And I will, as governor, turn to that. But first, before we talk about tax equity, I think we need to realize that our state has a staggeringly bad fiscal management problem. We have audits that are going unaddressed. We have no-bid contracts rife throughout state government. And we've had no actual review of the current services portion of the budget, which is in excess of 90% of the budget over the last 5 years. People wonder why our spending's gone up 65% in 5 years. One, the governor hasn't done a thorough review. Secondly, there hasn't been a public hearing on 90% plus of the state budget in 5 years. Why? Because of partisan failure. Because the Democrats and the Republicans can't get along. The Democrats have to pass a budget. They're the majority. The Republicans have, over the last few years, wanted to vote no. They want the option of that. What does that mean? It means that nothing happens. And we end up with outrageous amounts of spending. We need to dig in to the budget, look at the spending side first, and then we can responsibly address the taxes.
Thank you all. Let's get to our next question. In recent years, Maine has adopted a number of new statewide programs and regulatory requirements affecting employers, from paid family and medical leave and earned paid leave to extended stewardship for packaging and food waste programs. Our question: as governor, how will you approach the overall volume and scope of new mandates on Maine businesses, and how would you evaluate the cumulative impact of existing requirements on small and seasonal employers as they operate day to day? And we'll start this round with Jonathan Bush.
Those are wonderful examples of the bloat that we call it the Augusta virus. You actually have to stay more than 6 feet away to keep from getting the Augusta virus. This is a state that has added program after program after program. We've netted 3,337 new laws added to our rolls during this administration. You mentioned several agencies. Most of everything you just mentioned is something that is regularly provided for in the free market, but instead the state decided to raise its elbows and say, no, I'm going to deliver it. I'm going to make everyone play my game because, I don't know, is it because they think they're so good at it? Because it currently costs about $77,000 to add one dentist to the Medicaid rolls. So they're not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer when they do deliver things. And they've crowded out the regular market for social services. And as a result, we are now chasing an average of 6 to 8 businesses across the border just to New Hampshire. Just net shift of businesses out of Maine to New Hampshire every month. Each one of these benefits, each one of these quote-unquote benefits, these outrageous, hubristic encroachments on the dignity and identity of the businesses and citizens of Maine is chasing yet another pocket of opportunity for people to not need social services because they can rise, because they can own, because they can be proud. We are sapping pride, ownership out of Mainers with our arrogant idea that we can do things better through the state than the market can do, and it's embarrassing.
Neerav Shah.
Well, it was on. All
The
right.
state can't even operate a microphone.
There we go. Let's start with just the overall business climate. There's much that can and should be done. And I will come to that. But let's also acknowledge that the rate of new business formation in Maine is among the highest it's ever been. Entrepreneurs here in our state are saying, hey, I've got an idea, and I think I'd like to make that idea a reality and employ other people to help do so. That said, there's a lot that we can and should do. And as governor, I have no interest in micromanaging the ways in which you all run your businesses. I have zero interest in trying to dictate the terms by which you deliver shampoo and conditioner to your clients and your customers. If there is a demand for shampoo in a particular size bottle versus another size container, then I assume your market research will figure out the best way to do so. So I have no interest as governor in getting into the weeds. All too often in government, we put both the micro and the mismanagement in micromanagement. And what I have learned in government is that where we can excel and what government should really focus on is what I've already outlined. Making sure that struggling families have what they need, whether it's food, heating oil assistance, or health care. In me, what you will find is a governor that will listen to you, that will address your concerns, and stand shoulder to shoulder in partnership rather than in opposition. The fault that I see in Augusta is that it has not listened to the concerns of the business community. The data privacy bill is evidence enough of that.
Hannah Pingree.
I think you're all in this room and you run businesses in Maine because Maine is a great state and we should be a better state in which you can start a small business. We actually have seen economic growth, faster economic growth in Maine than other New England states until President Trump took office. We're a state in which a lot of small businesses start. But I will recognize and probably agree with many people in this room that it is too hard to run a small business. I run a family restaurant, an inn, and to get a liquor license and submit your taxes online, you have to work with 3 different websites and 3 different state agencies, and it should be much simpler. We should be a great state to start and run a business. And the next governor can do a whole lot about that. But that being said, honestly, the challenge that I faced when running a small restaurant and inn was actually housing for workers. And the next governor needs to make it easier to do big projects, like build housing and build clean energy and build transmission lines and start new businesses. I put out a housing plan at hannahforgovernor.com that talks about a 90-day shot clock at DEP in which you can get a permit to build a housing project. That is one of the #1 impediments of having the workforce that we need here in the state of Maine, is actually to be able to build. And so as the next governor, that will be one of my main areas of focus.
Garrett Mason.
Thank you, and I'm so glad you mentioned some of these programs because I think 4 of these programs, specifically extended producer responsibility, paid family medical leave, PFAS in products, and data privacy are some of the worst things that have come out of Augusta in the past 8 years. Let's talk about EPR. EPR was a program that is meant to reduce waste in the stream, but what we have done is exempted virtually everybody and everything, so it's just a virtue signaling program for trash. Paid family medical leave, we had people who were offering programs at their places of work that were not exempted by the government and then had to go in and pay that tax for a year while the government figured out if that program was good enough or not when they were already offering it. PFAS in products. For those who own hotels, I hope you don't have a coffee maker because that's considered cookware and you're not going to be able to have that or buy new ones in the state of Maine anymore. And data privacy, my goodness, exempting politicians and keeping all of you under its wraps, absolute joke. All 4 of these programs have been instituted within the past 8 years and all of them have hurt you. If I become governor, all of them will go. They will be in the first budget to repeal them.
Owen McCarthy.
So in December 2024, the Maine Jobs Council released a report that said Maine was 50th in the country for new business starts. We need to turn that around. as I think about regulation, in my plan, we talk about for every one rule that's proposed, we're going to cut 2. And why do I say that? Because there's 135,000 businesses in the state, and there's 135,000 rules and regulations. So you each get one of them. And so we need to cut that. We also have proposed a red tape reduction commission that's going to come out and look for even more cuts. We're going to lean into what's going on with technology to make government more efficient. There's a lot happening with AI for how we can operate, and the world is changing around us, and we can use the tools for our betterment. When it comes to programs like paid family medical leave, like I think we need to get back to the drawing board on that one. New Hampshire has a nice voluntary program. There's also the scope of the reasons why you can take the time off is way too large, and there needs to be a grace period so someone that's coming out of high school that works immediately can't take the summer off for 12 weeks and get paid. And so we need to get back to the drawing board on that one.
Bobby Charles.
So I think that the elephant in the room is the 77% increase in the budget in the last 10 years. So the first thing you do in order to get back to the 2 big priorities that will make your life easier, cutting taxes and reducing the cost of energy, is that you have to actually cut this big budget and the waste that's in the budget. Yes, you need to go after the Maine care fraud, $500 million perhaps, enormous, and an unbelievably unconscionable taking, I guess I'll call it, legally from people. But at the end of the day, you've got to cut net energy billing, you've got to be able to cut things out of that budget, the illegal alien support, Maine Care wraparound EBT cards, 8,000 people in free housing. You need to get out of that. You get out of the business also of solar power subsidies and wind power subsidies and get back to basics. This 99% of the people in this state, 99% of the businesses in this state are small businesses. I have run a small business. I know what it means for 25 years. I know what it means to take out a HELOC loan, to keep it going and not tell your employees. I know how tough it is. At the end of the day, I have a plan to get energy costs down by 40%. You can go look at it. I want to cut property taxes dramatically. Interestingly, Hannah talks about housing costs. The reason that the median income for those under the age of 35 is $200 a month below median rental is property taxes. So if we can get property taxes down by rolling back 300 Democrat mandates and we can get energy costs down, life will become a lot better.
Ed Crockett.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. First, I want to give a little glimmer of hope. Data privacy is not done yet. We are working very actively behind the scenes right now because final enactment hasn't come to make this bill much more business friendly. Unfortunately, the legislature does not understand or seemingly respect the business community. And sadly, that falls on the majority party since we've been operating under a majority budget for the last 6 years. And it really means majority rules. Paid family medical leave is the perfect example. We need a paid family medical leave law. But it was introduced incredibly one-sided and unfairly, taking and taxing both employers and employees to build up the fund to support it, and it hasn't even been rolled out yet. Now we're looking at a proposal in the legislature where we're going to give $219 million for $300 checks, taking it out of the rainy day fund. My suggestion 2 years ago is why don't we use some of that rainy day money and build the paid family medical leave bucket so that we could have started the program immediately.
And David, if you would, I'm going to go out of order here because Rick Bennett has to leave. I'd like to let him weigh in on this question.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate the courtesy to my fellow panelists here. I'm going to answer this question very simply. I think it was, what would I do as governor? And the first thing I would do is listen. And I would do it in an organized fashion. You know, years ago, before I served in public office, I was president of the Senate when we had a tied Senate, and then I got out and I ran businesses and helped my wife raise our 2 beautiful kids. But, you know, Angus King was governor, and he was an independent governor, our last independent governor, and he did something which I will replicate, which is having regular quarterly meetings with CEOs of businesses across this state. That's number one. Number two, I will work on a sector-by-sector basis to have meetings like this where we can have open conversations about the impact of what's happening in Augusta on your businesses. What are the pressure points? What are the issues as they're emerging that What works, what doesn't work. Overarching all of it will be just common sense. We need common sense regulation, not, as you're hearing somewhat today, partisan approaches to solving issues. We need inclusivity. And that's, I just want to say, I'm running for governor because we need a different kind of leadership. A leadership that's grounded in inclusivity and integrity, not ideology. And I'm running as an independent because Maine's next chapter should not be dictated by party bosses in Washington, D.C., with special interests dumping billions of dollars into our elections. So, as your governor, I will listen first and foremost, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Rick. Next, David Jones.
Well, the answer to this problem is we need to elect a Republican governor here in the state of Maine. And we have to make sure we have a majority in the House and the Senate. We have to be a business-friendly state. The idea that these Democrats are talking about lowering taxes when they're the ones that have increased them over year after year after year. They've come up with ridiculously crazy ideas of taxing us. They were talking about taxing ambulance rides, prescriptions, everything under the sun, streaming. I mean, you just look at it. And so there's people up at this table who have been part of that. I'm not part of that. I started my company, I was 17 years old. I've been self-employed my entire life. I've fought with all these regulations we have here. We have 135,000 regulations in the state of Maine. That's oppression. Government is definitely the problem we have here in the state. And the Democrats, I'm sorry, I have Democrat friends, but we definitely don't agree when it comes to business. Businesses, we are entrepreneurs. Americans are entrepreneurs. We fight for our existence. What are we fighting against? Government. Every single time we try to do something, there's another rule, another application, another hurdle for us to jump. If we don't get a Republican governor, Republican House, Republican Senate, I'm sorry, we're going to have serious problems. And just think about that. We're saying that what they've been doing to us for the past 50 years is right. I'm sorry. I'm running because I want to make the changes that need to be made for businesses here in the state of Maine.
Troy Jackson.
Well, we've certainly seen how the state of Maine runs under a Republican governor, and certainly all of you under Republican tariffs and tourism certainly took a big hit under the current Republican president. And we don't need any more of that. And I would say, to Hannah's benefit, the last time that the budget actually went down, I think the only time it went down was under her leadership as Speaker of the House in the 124th legislature. And that is a fact, that the budget actually went down when she was Speaker and I was in the Senate. So Democrats do the right things when they have to. We had to increase the budget because of the starvation under the LePage years, the revenue sharing and things like that was cut. So I'm just not going to sit here and listen to people talk about that. I mean, there's times that services have to be paid for, and that's just the simple fact of the matter. We have things that I agree with. I'm not a fan of a lot of things the governor has done. I think that the Department of Labor should not be running the paid family medical leave. I actually think UNM should be doing it. I think they could do a lot better job to run that program. The PFAS, there's issues there too, extended packaging. But, other states are doing this also, and it's something that the state of Maine has to grapple with. And do we need to, tighten it up? Absolutely. And that's what I think the next governor has to do, is have not a top-down approach like this governor. I've worked with all of you.
Troy, I'm going to have to cut you off on that. I appreciate it. And finally, Ben Mitchell.
Quick, tough one to do in a minute and a half. So I visited over 50 different industries in the state of Maine, and the economic forecast, like I said earlier, shows no job growth through 29. That's not because Maine supports business. You have to try to do that badly. Honestly, the issues are not just regulations, it's taxes, it's costs. Electricity, for example, does not have to be that high. And we're working against our welfare system. And I haven't advocated to cut the benefit system. I've advocated to give folks a bridge to get employment and keep their benefits on the way up until they don't need it. That's why we're 4% lower in labor force participation rate. You can't lock people in that. As far as the industry goes, you just have to sit down with industry leaders and review what are the choke points that they are feeling from a regulation standpoint? And then separately, where are the opportunities to support them? One of the industries I met with was in the agricultural space. Great Maine farming family, which by the way, our farmers need much more support, as do all our legacy industries. And I asked them, what's better about doing business in Florida, because they had locations there in Maine. And they listed 9 things right off the top. And like I said earlier, I've run businesses in 46 states. Clearly, when businesses support business, those states do better. People do better. So we just need to get behind pro-business policies, which will not hurt the average worker. It will help them make more money and take better care of themselves and their family as well. And then we can get Maine on the right path going forward.
Thank you all. Our next question is about energy costs and infrastructure reliability. Energy and utility costs remain a significant and growing expense for businesses, with Maine consistently ranking among the highest cost states for electricity, particularly in rural and seasonal areas where infrastructure constraints can also affect reliability and expansion. Our question: what specific steps would you take as governor to address energy costs, particularly in tourism-dependent regions of the state? And we begin this round with Nirav Shah.
Great. Thanks, Pat. I think every family and every business in Maine is grappling with an ever-increasing electricity and energy bill. Certainly our family is, and I've heard from scores of other families and businesses across the state that get sticker shock every time their bill comes in every month. As you all know, Maine pays some of the highest rates in the country for electricity and has had some of the highest increases just over the past 5 years. None of this is acceptable. To me, I start this conversation with thinking about how we need to rein CMP in. CMP gets paid on a capital expenditure basis. They spend more money and they make more money. They don't get paid based on, I don't know, how well the grid is actually doing. And I met with CMP not long ago and I asked them, how could it be that Maine has the worst performing grid in the country? And they said, well, we have a lot of trees. New Hampshire and Vermont have a lot of trees. Well, it's really cold here. Well, you know, Montana and North Dakota are pretty cold. Somehow or other, Maine is at the bottom of reliability. We need to change the way that CMP is reimbursed and paid. Rather than paying them just based on how much money they spend, we should actually pay them based on the way you would pay any vendor, which is based on their performance. Once we put that set of incentives in place, they will have an incentive to make sure they are delivering on the promise they make and actually start lowering the rates. Now, there's more that we can do. We also need to make sure we are decoupling our reliance on fossil fuels. Right now, the other reason Maine is paying so much is because we rely on spot prices for natural gas and ultimately oil.
Nirav, I'm going to have to cut you off at that point. Hannah Pingree is next.
Many small businesses are struggling with the cost of energy, and I actually agree entirely with Nirav sitting next to me that it has to be about our utilities being paid for performance. I actually helped over the last couple of years with the huge recovery after the 23 and 24 storms. And we did a public meeting down in Washington County, and Washington County actually has the worst reliability of any place in the country, and that's in Versant territory. So there's much more that needs to be done to rein in CMP to cap the cost of capital that they are now getting huge rates of return on the backs of ratepayers. I think you'll probably hear others down the line saying, if we just get rid of clean energy and we stop incentivizing it, then all of our problems will be solved. But the two biggest drivers of the cost of energy in the state of Maine are the price of natural gas and storm recovery costs. So actually investing in the reliability of our grid, investing in clean energy that produces jobs in Maine at a lower rate, we need to ensure we are getting low-cost clean energy. It will long-term make our grid more sustainable, produce good-paying jobs, and bring down the cost of energy.
Up next, Garrett Mason.
I think one of the reasons that Maine's energy load is so unreliable is because we're relying on unreliable form of energy, intermittent forms of energy. Solar, wind, industrial scale of both of those are what is causing the price to be so high. I think what we have to do is we have to increase the supply of natural gas. And as Speaker Pingree just said, natural gas costs are high. And the reason for that is because we're artificially making sure that the supply is cut. The first thing I'm going to do as governor is I'm going to initiate a lawsuit against the governor of New York and Massachusetts for stopping the development of pipeline infrastructure into the ISO New England grid. The other thing I'll do is I'll make sure that President Trump extends the waiver of the Jones Act. We import 27 tanker loads full of LNG into Maine from countries that don't like us into Maine. We need to stop that. We need to get American natural gas from the Gulf of America into our ISO New England grid. The other thing we have to do is we have to roll back the incentivization of large-scale industrial solar and wind. We also have to have a roadmap to the future. We have to start planning now for things like small modular nuclear reactors, maybe large-scale nuclear reactors. We also have to be planning for someday in the future, large tech companies to be able to produce their own energy and add to our supply. So I do think that you will see there's very different opinions on how energy should be procured in the state of Maine. And going forward, we have to have reliable and consistent energy. Thank you.
Owen McCarthy.
I mean, you've all heard the stories. I was talking to a lady in Island Falls, Maine, who's a senior citizen who has a farmhouse that used to be $200 or $300 a month for electricity, and now it's $700 a month. And like someone on fixed income, it's hard to imagine them to like cover that. If you look at our electricity market in the state of Maine, it's a $2.5 billion market. Right now, $250 million of that is actually solar subsidies for developers in a program that was an outlier compared to the rest of the country. As I think about, and in the winter, where it doesn't work as well, we need to buy, yes, there is examples of fossil fuels being more expensive because we need to buy tank trucks of oil for Cousins Island or bring in LNG into Everett, Mass. So we need to solve that by finding base layer energy. And base layer energy either looks like buying more hydro from Canada, expanding the Algonquin pipeline, investing in small modular nuclear in the long run, which is a 5 to 10 year solution, so you won't see it there. And then we need to take these hidden fees that are on the generators and bring them back into the budget so there's transparency for all of you, that you know what fees you're getting charged and they're not taxes that are unknown to you, and bring them into the budget of the state, and we can debate them and bring them as low as possible.
Thank you. Bobby Charles.
So energy affects literally everything we do. Everything on your tables is affected by energy. These lights, everything is affected by energy. Municipal bills, schools, and prisons are affected by energy. We had a 36.3% increase in the cost of energy last year. I have a 25-point plan that the campaign had me reduce to 8 points, but you can see it online. I spent an hour yesterday with the president and vice president of CMP. I am absolutely deadly serious about getting energy costs down by 40%. There are a number of very specific ways you can do that. You get rid of net energy billing right off the top. No more subsidies for solar, no more subsidies for wind. Think about it for a minute. If you were going to choose the best possible way to have energy generated in the state of Maine, it certainly wouldn't be sun. We're going to complete the natural gas pipeline. We're going to uncap hydro. We're going to really retool the PUC. There's a 25-point plan, but at the end of the day, energy and cutting taxes are the only way that we get back to a normal pro-business state, which we once were and can be again.
Ed Crockett.
You know, unfortunately, much of what's driven on the energy side is coming from the federal government. Look what's happening with fossil fuels right now as a result of what's going on in Iran. I was driving through Gorham the other day, and a gallon of gas is now $7 here. And 3 weeks ago, it was half that. You know, we need to continue to invest in new energy. The existing options, they're not going away, but they are way too expensive. A couple of years ago, I invested in heat pumps. And I must say, I was a little bit pleasantly surprised how much money I've saved in our home. That's some investments we should continue to grow. We need to have a better working relationship with CMP. CMP is not going anywhere. I mean, they're basically a monopoly. So we got to work with them more closely and better. And frankly, the legislature's antagonist approach with CMP over the last number of years is unhealthy, and it's not working.
David Jones.
Well, if you want solar and you want wind, do it on your own dime, not on the taxpayer's back. We have this billing item on our bill that we pay whether we wanted to or not. I am totally against solar and I'm totally against wind. It doesn't work here in the state of Maine. It's been proven time and time again. By the time these panels expire, the life of these panels is ridiculously short. They've made it better, but it still doesn't work. We have good fuel, we have fossil fuel, we have the ability to generate good power. We need to bring small modular nuclear devices into the state of Maine. Now, there are some hurdles. People say, well, we want the small modular nuclear reactors. Yeah, okay, great. The federal government, we can work with the president. I would work with the president of the United States and the federal government to make sure that those rules, and we did everything we could to shorten the timeline to get it involved. If we've had 4 or 5 modular nuclear reactors in the state of Maine, we would have, it'd be like lights on. People say they want AI. We can't afford, the power's not there to put AI here in the state of Maine. I like AI. I think it's a great thing. The Democrats are trying to put a block and stop it. I don't think it's a bad thing. Progress, that's a problem with the state of Maine. People have stood in the way, Democrats in particular, of progress here in the state of Maine. We lost Dragon Concrete. Dragon Concrete had to close down because they couldn't get the natural gas that they needed. You know, the natural gas it's not the bad thing. When Paul LePage was governor, he did everything he could to get the pipeline through. And I think we have to work with the state of Massachusetts to get that pipeline through. It has to happen. But the bottom line is let's use what makes sense. Let's apply common sense to our energy. If we were all sitting in this room right now and the lights were off, we wouldn't be happy, would we?
Thank you, David. Troy Jackson?
Dragon couldn't stay up because of Canadian subsidies, just to be clear. The thing with the energy is that I definitely think that natural gas and all those things is still part of our energy market here. I mean, and I'm glad that somebody brought up Versant, being from Allagash, because that's our energy. But I want to make sure that we continue to push after wind, because Mercer County has some of the best wind in the entire United States, and it actually does compete with oil and natural gas. It's wind that blows at night, it's wind that blows during the winter, and we could actually be in this state selling wind power to Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. And what I am concerned about is the PUC's put out a plan that they want those states to actually be a partner. I want to actually sell that power so we can lower our energy costs here in Maine. Maine could be a real player where we could be selling that power to those states and drive down our energy costs. And that's what people in this room have to be telling the PUC is we don't want to be a partner with these other states. We want to be the ones that's actually selling the power to those states so we do drive down our energy costs. And this is something that's going to be huge for the state, and we really need to come together and make that case that let's not be nice to the other states. Let's actually be a player and actually drive down our costs.
Thank you, Troy. Ben Midgley.
Yes, such a long subject for a minute and a half conversation. But I will tell you, it is not CMP. Don't buy that. CMP does not raise your electricity pricing. What has raised the electricity pricing right now is also not natural gas. Natural gas is half of what it cost in 2022. Your electricity prices can't be double what they are from there when natural gas is half of what it is. You have fluctuations, but that's not what's driving it either. The solar connections are also what is breaking down the grid. We have 50, 60, 70-year-old transformers, and when you have over 400 solar projects in the state, they send electricity back into the transformers. It comes in from the top rather than the bottom. It causes the transformers to work in reverse, and that's what breaks them down. Now, solar subsidies and wind, that's all fine, but it shouldn't be on the backs of ratepayers. You're paying about $200 million a year right now in subsidies for this, and you're paying almost 30 cents a kilowatt hour for this electricity because they're guaranteed profits. That doesn't have to be that way either. So we need to get out of the subsidy business, let them grow competitively as they should with all other energy sources. And then also half the bill you're paying is from mandates like renewable portfolio standards where we have to buy 4% more per year. So your electricity bill is never going to go down under that plan. The regional greenhouse gas emissions, the heat pump compact, we can lower electricity with just some common sense focuses and still allow renewables to grow on their own.
And Jonathan Bush.
I'd like to start every opportunity I can with agreeing with Hannah. I too am anti-storm. I do think the storms drive our costs up, and anything we can do on both sides of the aisle to have fewer storms, I'm all for it. But But the idea that natural gas is expensive is ludicrous, and in fact, the primary driver of natural gas cost in Maine is Maine's unwillingness to allow the infrastructure to deliver the supply we need. So in the wintertime, we cap out our supply, and the price spikes because you have to send it to cover the heating duties, and therefore the electrical generation duties are starved out. That is a self-inflicted wound, as is net energy billing, as is what I will call all renewable energy that is performative environmentalism that doesn't scale and doesn't deliver. Of course, renewable energy can deliver value at scale, but not if the only way through to it is through a special insiders-only government tax gig. Behind the grid energy was not generated. I completely agree with my fellow Republicans. Of course, we need to make a path to small modular nuclear. Of course, we need to build our natural gas infrastructure. Of course, we need to reverse net energy billing. But we also should invite people to put power in behind the grid so that they can be incented to generate their own sources of electricity and put some competitive force. Another thing I hear from the Democrats is, well, we're going to manage CMP. Okay, well, they have a monopoly that you gave them. Let's break down that monopoly and give people alternatives to get electricity and see if that helps them respond on their own.
Very good, thank you. And our last question in this round is about housing availability. And the question is, what is your approach to addressing workforce and seasonal housing challenges in Maine? And what role should the state play in increasing housing availability? We start this round with Hannah Pingree.
Great. Well, I said earlier that I ran several small businesses where our number one challenge was finding workers, and the number one challenge we had was housing for those workers. And I'm sure, like many people in this room, we have bought houses, we have put up sheds, we have found every possible way to house workers, especially in the summertime when we all can make the most money in the hospitality business. But obviously, Maine needs more of a plan than the makeshift ways in which employers are trying to band-aid this challenge. And that is, we need more workers in the state, and we need more housing for them, especially near where there are so many jobs, especially in the summertime. So I put out a plan at hannahforgovernor.com. You can read all of the details, but it is about creating much more housing supply, affordable home ownership, affordable rentals for seniors and for young people. It is about stopping private equity from buying up our mobile home parks, eliminating some of the more affordable housing we currently have in the state. It is much more about continuing to push on zoning and land use. We need to make it possible in the state of Maine to produce the housing that we need. I mentioned a 90-day shot clock. We need to ensure that NIMBY neighbors are not rejecting housing projects that will provide more housing supply for our communities. And it's also about investing in the workforce and innovation. Maine is the most forested state in the country. We can produce much more of the housing that we need by investing in workers in the construction industry and investing in the businesses that are producing housing supply right now. So I think the next governor, this is one of my top priorities. We need to focus very much on housing. My old office put out...
I'm going to have to cut you off there.
All right.
Next up is Garrett Mason.
Thank you.
I could go on.
No, you can't.
Thank you. So my first experience with the lack of workforce housing was actually when I was working in baseball and hockey before I got into politics. People don't realize this, but the Portland Sea Dogs, my old employer, the Lewiston Maniacs, I believe even the Hearts of Pine, have billet families. They stay with families in their local community, or you have to find a place to house them. That's the case for all seasonal businesses. You have to find a place for these people to live temporarily. And I think one of the things that we can do to resolve that is increase our local workforce. We have to make sure that tourism and hospitality jobs are something that people want to get into, and make sure that they understand that there's six-figure jobs that you can get working in tourism and hospitality. And I think that goes to education. We need to make sure that not only are community colleges and the University of Maine system working towards getting people into these trades, but we also need to make sure that the CTEs are involved in making some of those decisions and making these jobs attractive to young people, because if they already live in Maine, they likely don't need a house. So that kind of reduces that demand. The other thing that we need to do is we need to encourage local communities, especially in tourist-based economy communities, to be setting up like shared type workforce housing that they can all use together and finance together. I think those are a couple of the things that we need to do. I really do like some of the stuff that's happened to be positive out of Augusta with some of the ADU developments. I think that's been a really positive thing for building out houses. And I could go on.
Owen McCarthy.
So one of my lines early on in the campaign is like, we need to legalize housing. We need to make it legal to build it again here, which I agree with on the permitting times, a lot of things that people have said. But I was in Caribou at the time, and they looked at me and said, Owen, I can get you as many permits as you want, I just can't get a plumber right now. And so this is a multifaceted problem, and there's 4 levels: state, local, workforce, and innovation. At the state level, we can make it easier. Things like right now, if you divide a lot by 3, you have to get the DEP and DOT involved. Let's make that number 9 and move it up. At the local level, I'm a big local control guy, so I don't want to tell you exactly what to do in your local areas. However, New Hampshire passed a law where they gave the option for third-party review if the developer wants to pay for it, which means that you can have timelines that are met by someone that's contracted to meet them. At the workforce level, our CTE program says there's a problem to solve. There's more demand than supply out there across there's more kids that want in than there's supply for them, and so we can solve that. And at the innovation level, there's rules that get in the way of things like custom modular or new types of building, and we're going to set up innovation zones in places in the communities that want them, that we can make it easier to build those so we can get those 42,000 units we need online ASAP.
Bobby Charles.
So I think if you simplify this for a moment, 3 words: mandates, taxes, and at the end of the day, trades. We don't need more public housing. The Democrats pass more public housing and try to think that's the remedy. We are going to need 83,000 new units in about 6 years or 7 years. We can't do that with public housing. What we need to do is roll back the 300 or 400 mandates that are placed on municipal entities, both counties and towns, so that property taxes come down, so that people who are young can afford to buy a house and people who are older can afford to stay in their homes. We also need to lower taxes generally, because that will have the exact effect we want in terms of home building. We obviously need to make certifications and permitting easier. One of the ways you do that as a governor is to leverage the power of the governor over the municipal budgets to get them, incentivize them to do the building. And the last thing, I graduated from Maranacook High School. Almost every junior high school and high school in the state had trades. Everything from welding to electricity to cars, and we need to get trades back in the schools. It took me 3.5 years recently to build a garage just to find labor to work with me. We need to get trades back in the schools. Once we're pro-business, housing will actually be part of the solution and part of the outcome.
Ed Crockett.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. I think, the housing availability is much bigger than just the tourism and hospitality industry. However, housing availability and workforce shortages are connected at the hip. Being a lifelong Portlander, young people in this industry cannot afford to live where they work. If you want to rent in Portland, you're talking well into 4 figures for a month. And, especially if it's an entry-level hospitality job, I don't know where they're going to find housing. So obviously, big picture, we need as much housing as we can get. And the more affordable, definitely the better. This industry relies on seasonal workers a great deal. In coastal regions, they can't afford the rent. In rural areas, it's even worse, since it's hard to find any housing. So we've got to address those issues. I think first-time home buyer relief would go a long way to help this issue as well as more friendly zoning and less regulations to help people get into a safe environment.
David Jones.
Well, this is definitely my wheelhouse. I've been in the construction and real estate business for my entire life. I started when I was 17 years old. I built tens of thousands of units. One project many people in this room will know I built was 2,133 units was the Disney Caribbean Beach Resort. So I know about building, and I know about affordability. The problem we have here in the state of Maine is government. They're in the way. All the rules and regulations we fight every single day, the permitting process, the DEP, the towns with the ridiculous regulations, rendering land useless. We have a constitutional right in the state of Maine to protect our land. One of the few states in the country where we have that right. So we got to get government out of the way. We got to have, you talk about, I'm a big vocational guy. I wouldn't be here today if I didn't start, in school, high school, with wood shop, metal shop. We had those things available to us. But the bottom line is that if we teach these kids how to do the jobs, we don't have the work because the government's in the way with all their permitting problems. It's one thing after another. So listen, it's not the answer. It's not the job of government to create jobs. It's not the job of government to rule over us. It's the job of government to do the things that we want done and we need done for our state to benefit. The biggest export we have in our state is our brain trust. Our kids are leaving. Yeah, you can teach them vocational schools, vocational training, but guess what? As soon as they can, they're going to leave to go to another state where there's bountiful jobs.
And Troy Jackson?
I think one thing that's missing in state government is we don't have anything that rises to housing level. We don't have a Department of Housing. We don't have a place for developers to know what they can get from state government, any help. And I propose that we have something like that so people can come in, renters, developers. I do think that it's too hard for developers to operate right now, and we need to lessen the burden on them. I also think that what the university is doing with 3D printed homes is something that's very important. I mean, these are really nice homes that you can stack, so urban areas, you can go up with them, and they're, can be quickly done. Within 24 hours, you can build one of these. You can deliver them on site. It's not for everyone, but it's a piece of it. I think modular homes is something that we used to do a lot of in Maine, and we quit doing. I think we got to get back to that, and regulations for stick-built houses, obviously. But I also think we can do incentives for renters. We can do incentives for homeowners to help people across the state, and that's something I feel very strongly about. The other thing, though, I mean, we've worked with the chamber, Quincy over there, to help do more child care. I think that puts money in people's pockets to help young people get into homes. There's a lot of things that state government can do to help young people stay in Maine. One thing obviously would be to raise the rates that they're getting paid so that they can afford. But we have to bring down homeowners' costs. We have to put more money in their pockets. And all these things will bring people back. And the trades is one of them. I would say that the building trades is one way that we can start training more people to get into these projects.
Ben Mitchell.
Okay, a little tongue-in-cheek, but you don't really need workforce housing if you don't have any jobs forecasted to grow through 2029. And at the end of the day, it's not really chicken and the egg. You have to support businesses before you need additional housing. And just a little bit of a joke there. But Maine is only building at half the national average. That's a fact. And the only way to lower prices is by volume, right? And the average family, I believe, has to have an income of about $120,000 right now to afford a home. So you have to get more volume to bring it down. One of the primary issues is, of course, permitting. I would certainly institute an executive order day one to have a 60-day permit rule with the DEP. If you don't have your permit at that point in time, you're going to get it. Talk to developers, and I've talked to the largest developers in the state that expect something after 6 months, takes 18 months. You can't have that. Geez, that was quick. Okay. So you've got to run that through the DEP, the LUPC as well. You've got to streamline zoning and land use codes. You've got to have a multi-tiered approach to housing, all the way from single families to prefabricated to unused buildings. You got to go through the Maine Uniform Building Code with builder feedback because that's creating a lot of obstacles. Low-income housing penalties do hurt. If you have more development, then you will have builders building homes in the lower price point. So you don't need to penalize people who don't build those homes. And then you do, of course, need some support federally from interest rates. As interest rates goes down, people are going to buy more, but you need that volume to make sure there's something for them to buy.
Thank you, Ben. Jonathan Bush.
Yeah, I think this is a really important sort of stark contrast between the parties and the need to switch. I actually wrote my senior thesis in college on the ghettoizing effect of the Lyndon Johnson public housing initiative inside of the Great Societies program and the creation of multi-generational poverty that was inflicted on our country, particularly African Americans that had gone from fields to factories, is very clear and devastating. And here in Maine, we've decided we're going to try it again. And everybody's talking about how many government housing projects they're going to build. These are things that cost 50% more per unit, take longer, and create a benefit trap for people, which prevents them from following work when their opportunities move around. Workforce is not a cut of, it sounds to me like we talk about workforce like it's a cut of meat. These are people that want to have the American dream, that want to own, that want to move around and be more powerful at the end of a year than they were before. And we are all competing to how to better disempower them, it sounds like, on the other side of the aisle. I don't want a government that becomes kind of Karen, institutional Karen to everybody, how they live, where they live. The solution, as I've heard others say, is to legalize the building of housing in Maine. My ad says eliminate duplication and waste. The duplication part, most of the data comes from trying to get permits and infrastructure to build housing in Maine. It's a huge opportunity, particularly around the construction of multifamily housing, which maybe people think of as associated with people in a workforce type.
Thank you, Jonathan. Let's hear from Neerav Shah.
Great. Not long ago, I had the privilege of attending a conference that our friends at Merida were hosting. And I heard someone frame up this issue in a really elegant and poignant way, which is we think about housing as the problem, when in fact, housing is the solution to many of the problems that our state is facing, whether it's on a human scale, whether it's on a workforce development or economic development scale. Housing is the solution. So the challenge for the next governor, I think, will be to balance the need to build more housing while simultaneously preserving what makes Maine the wonderful place it is, without wrecking our environment, without spoiling the wonderful views and landscapes that many of your clients, tourists, come here to enjoy. In that regard, there are wonderful opportunities in playbooks. And here, I agree with many of my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, on the need to unshackle the demand to build more housing in Maine, without a doubt. There are opportunities to do that in a way, again, that does not wreck our environment. One is by focusing on density. High-density housing, particularly in areas where there's a lot of economic opportunity, is a way to create not just more housing, but also generate more tax revenue for the municipalities that would be hosting it. So where there are areas in Maine where density is the key, then the governor's office and the entire state government should support that. And my time is up.
Thank you all very much. We have time for a few lightning round questions before we get to your closing statements. We'd like a yes or no response to these questions, and if you need 10 seconds to add on to it, feel free to do so. We will start this one with Garrett Mason, and the question is, should Maine continue to treat tourism marketing as a protected, dedicated investment, even in tight budget years? Yes or no?
I've already said it. Yes.
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 Yes, and I will add briefly in those 10 seconds, the $700,000 that is now dedicated to that tourism dollars needs to stay there.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I believe it shouldn't be increased.
Ben?
Yes, and increase.
Jonathan?
Just to be interesting, I don't think anybody should be protected in any way. We've got a giant insider network in Augusta where lobbyists are going berserk and state reps have disproportionate power. I believe that tourism is a critical area, should grow dramatically, but the idea that I'm going to have a pathway to my office that gives special people special treatment is off.
Neerav?
Yes.
Hannah?
Yes.
Next question on tip credits. Maine and most states allow a tip credit where employers can count tips toward minimum wage requirements. Do you support keeping Maine's current tip credit structure? Yes or no? Owen, we start with you.
Yes.
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 Love these guys.
Do you support the current tip structure?
Yes. Yes, that's the question.
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Jonathan? Jonathan?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and I have negotiated that with employees, and I know it's complicated, and we need to retain the current structure.
Garrett?
Yes, I do.
You can't hide. All right. The next question we'll start with Bobby, and that question is: would you support creating a sales tax-free weekend or similar retail incentive to drive consumer spending and boost local retail activity in Maine? Yes or no?
Anything that cuts taxes is good with me, so yes.
I would definitely consider that. We've been talking about that in our taxation committee for a few years now.
Why not a month? Yes.
Probably not.
Ben?
Yeah, that's a promotion, not a strategy, but you can do those things periodically to try to stimulate activity and get people going.
What Ben said, that's a gimmick, silly. Maybe we'll do it sometimes for fun or whatever, but we need to lower the entire tax environment.
No, it just shifts activity that would have happened later to one particular weekend. It doesn't actually create growth.
Agree, no, it doesn't make sense, but open to other strategies to attract tourists to Maine.
Yeah, I'd have to agree that it's we got to lower the tax rates across the board, so probably not.
And Owen?
Yes, and in my plan we talk about investing in ways to attract people during the shoulder seasons into the state, because I think we want to expand that market for everyone out there.
All right. Finally, outdoor recreation investment. Outdoor recreation, from ski areas to campgrounds, is a major part of Maine's tourism economy. Should the state do more to invest in outdoor recreation infrastructure and access? Yes or no? We start with Ed.
First, thank you for that layup. Absolutely.
Invest in, say that again?
Whether we should invest in outdoor recreation infrastructure and access.
Well, it depends on what the investment is. You know, I'm about private enterprise and not government, so I think if it's a good business, people are going to buy into it, and they should be able to afford it on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been frustrated that the general fund doesn't kick in more money to snowmobile and tour, ATV and things like that.
Ben?
Yeah, private industry just needs the right infrastructure to support what it's doing. In terms of state properties that drive tourism, yes, the state needs to maintain those, so you're going to continue to drive folks to come to those sites.
We should, but we is not the state government. We should invest more in infrastructure. There's a lot we can do there, but not the government. The government has to shrink in Maine badly.
Yes, much of the outdoor economy, particularly the winter economy, is part of infrastructure. It's no different from roads. If we can develop our trails, then more people will come here.
Yes, Maine's outdoor economy is growing. It's good for every tourism business. Maine people just approved a rail trail bond at the polls. I think we should continue to invest.
I think we need to reduce regulations so businesses invest in themselves more easily. I also support changing the way we do some of our existing investments.
Owen?
I want to invest in adding customs to the Portland airport so we can get international flights in here and get more tourists in from Europe and from Canada, and a flight out in Aruba in the winter for all of us that want to get out of the cold.
And Bobby?
Well, I'm all in favor of Aruba. We are number 50 in the country for infrastructure. So what you need to do is incentivize private sector investment in infrastructure, but at the same time, a public good is actually protecting and maintaining public lands. So I'm very much in favor of that.
And with that, we now get to our closing statements. You will each have 45 seconds to make your elevator pitch, if you will. And we're going to begin this round with David Jones.
Well, thank you all for being here today and listening to everything we have to say. You've got an obvious choice here in 2026. I mean, to make the right choice for the next governor of the state of Maine. Now, you got to elect a guy who is an entrepreneur, a CEO, self-made, fought, knows what it's like to go up and beat the odds. We are up against some serious odds here in the state of Maine. We have been pushed down like never before. It's tough. My kids, my oldest son said, "Dad, if you don't win this election, I'm moving to Florida." Why can't we be like Florida? Why can't we be like New Hampshire? Why are our taxes through the roof? We have to work together. All right, there's some great candidates here. I think I'm the best guy. I've been around Maine 30 years of my life. I've invested everything into the state of Maine. This is what I love. I'm here because I love the state, not because I have to be. We're here because we care.
David Jones, thank you. Troy Jackson.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to us this morning. I've had a chance to work with a lot of you, and I really appreciate the time. We may not agree on everything, but in my time, I've always offered the opportunity for you to come in and tell me what the issues are. And that's what I'm talking about, is I don't want a top-down approach if I'm governor. I certainly feel like that's what we've had for a long time. And I've gotten a chance to understand what you're dealing with. And as a Democrat, I've been very open to having tax incentives that brought businesses in. I did the bill to bring IDEX to Westbrook, Bath Iron Works. We did McCrum up in Washburn. And so as far as I'm concerned, businesses that provide good jobs, do good things for their employees is exactly what I want as governor. And that's what I'm going to do. But I also want to make sure that, we have a governor that actually promotes his state and talks about what a great state we have.
Troy Jackson, thank you
because
very much.
that's what I believe we do have.
Thank you very much. Ben Midgley is next.
Okay, let's see, 45 seconds. So Maine needs to support the business economy without question. You need to support personal opportunity and prosperity, which we're not really doing with the heavy tax burden right now and the regulations for businesses. And you need to provide a path for all those folks that are on state welfare. We have about, 400,000 people on state support, and the average benefits for those folks in the state of Maine is $40,000 a year. You need to provide a path for those folks to get off of that and maintain their benefits while they're getting off of it. And then by doing that, you create a system for all folks and businesses to do well, and then the state is off on the right track.
Up next is Jonathan Bush.
There's a pretty clear distinction here. There's about half the people up here who believe that the state should continue to expand its role in our lives and that will help people. And there's a group of people who believe that the state should reduce its role in our lives and that will help people. Good news that it's Maine, so we all want to help people. New Hampshire is got about 10% of its GDP in government. We have 18, so you can imagine I'm on the side of maybe a little less. The other question you may want to ask is who can do it? So I have started a company in my basement and then grown it up to 6,500 people, 1,000 in Maine, that helps businesses survive bureaucracy, helps them grow and own and succeed. That is all I've done. I've run this operation at the largest scale in healthcare in the country. I believe that's the kind of executive that we need if you happen to want to shrink the role of government.
Up next, Dr. Nirav Shah.
Governor Brennan once said that the best social policy is a good job. I think he was right. You all are part of the way in which that happens for the highest number of Mainers of any sector. And so I thank and commend you for that. For me, as your governor, the question will be, where do we go from here? How do we expand the tourism industry? How do we support it in such a way that it can be even a greater and larger economic driver of long-term growth? My pledge to you as governor is that I will stand shoulder to shoulder with you, not in opposition with you, that you will have a trusted voice and an advocate to make sure your industry has the support that it needs. When you all do well, the entire state does well. Thank you.
Hannah Pingree is next.
Well, thank you again all for being here. I am a mom of a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. And I want my kids to be able to stay in Maine and have successful careers. And I think that's what everybody in this room wants. They want families to be able to stay in our state and be successful. When I was a young legislator, many young people were leaving the state of Maine. We were trying to figure out how do we keep young people here. Now young people do want to stay, but they want good paying jobs and housing that they can afford. The next governor actually has to know how to get things done. I have had an experience both as a small business owner, but also getting things done in government. As Speaker of the House, I worked to balance a budget. I partnered with Josh Chardy, the Republican leader, and we passed bipartisan budgets. We invested in infrastructure. We invested in families. Working in the last 7 years in state government, we actually also got things done. I worked with Billy Bob Buckingham on issues like storm recovery and investing in housing. The next governor needs to get things done. Thank you again. June 9th is the primary. Independents and Democrats can vote in a ranked choice election for that, and you can also vote as an independent in the Republican primary. So I'll hand that off to you, Garrett.
I believe that was the vote early and often pitch. Garrett Mason is next.
Well, thank you so much for having us here today. I very much appreciate the time. You know, my wife is from California. Don't hold that against her. And one of the things that she's learned about Mainers is that the only people more proud about their state than Texans are Mainers. You guys are the hospitality and tourism industry. You tell the story about Maine better than anybody else. And if I'm lucky enough to be your governor, I think one of the most important things that I can do for you is be an ambassador to the world on why Maine is the greatest place in the world to live, work, raise a family, and do business, and even come on vacation. And that is my pledge to you, is I will use the bully pulpit of the governor to tell not only your story, but our collective Maine story. So if you'd like to learn more, go to masonformaine.com. I very much appreciate your time, and thank you to Pat.
Thank you, Garrett. Owen McCarthy.
Yeah, so I'm a political outsider, but I'm a deep insider in Maine. I'm an entrepreneur and an engineer, and I focus on solving problems and thinking outside the box. I have roots north of Augusta, the only one on the Republican field that has that, so I know the rural Maine and the city. My roots are firmly rooted here, but my view is on the future. I can talk to you about sawmills or software, and where AI is changing a lot, so we need to lean in and figure out how to do that. And I want to make sure that together we can build a state that we can live, work, and prosper in. A state that no matter if you grew up in a double wide on the outskirts of Portland or a trailer off a dirt road in Patton, you can use your God-given talents to reach your highest potential with nothing standing in your way. Thank you so much. OwenForMaine.com. Look forward to meeting all of you.
Thank you, Owen. Bobby Charles.
I think I'm going to just use 3 words. I'm going to say cliff, consensus, tools. We are at the edge of a cliff right now. Anybody in business knows it. The tax burden is too high. We do not need more taxes or more public anything. We need more freedom, and we need more ability to just let our wings get us out there and keep moving as business people. The second thing is consensus. I think it's an interesting thing to look on this panel. There really is a consensus. One group believes that there should be lower taxes, there should be less government, less regulation, lower energy costs. The other thinks that the government is the solution. And I'm not in that group. In fact, the majority on this panel, I think, are in the other group. The last thing is the tools. I grew up here in the state of Maine. I love it. I was building houses at the age of 17, but I went away and I got tools. I mean, not only graduate education and economics and whatnot, but I've run a company for 25 years, and actually I have downsized bureaucracy, cut regulations, been a federal investigator. I will deliver to you that limited government you want. So with that, I would just say, keep thinking, and remember, this is really about cutting government.
Thank you very much. And finally, Ed Crockett.
Thank you, Pat. Our biggest challenge is getting the legislature to listen. That's not happening today. The problem is operational. Our business is conducted totally by majority rule. If you circle the wagons and get all to fall in line, you don't need to cooperate or collaborate, and compromise isn't even considered. Without the traditional 2/3 budget in play, there's no recourse. Your governor can make the legislature do the job they were elected to do, represent all of their constituents, and not become a rubber stamp for the party agenda. As an independent, I will not default to party line. I'll do what's right. Ed Crockett for Maine.com.
Thank you, Ed. We'd like to thank all of the candidates for being here and engaging in a thoughtful discussion. We recognize the demands on your time and appreciate you spending that time with us this morning. I think they all deserve a round of applause. Our thanks as well to the Maine Tourism and Hospitality Alliance for organizing today's event, and to all of you who attended. We hope you found it valuable. I'm going to hand this back over to Tony Cameron to wrap things up. Thanks so much.
Real quick, thank you to all the candidates. Really appreciate you taking your time and sharing your views. I think everyone in this room is incredibly proud of the industry and the state that we represent, and we all know that you do as well. A very big thank you to Pat Callahan for moderating. We have a small gift for Pat. Huge thank you to all of you for coming and engaging in the process. It's incredibly important that you all continue to do so. Our industry is incredibly meaningful and valuable to our state, and your engagement is super important to the success of it. One final note, on everyone's table is a flyer mentioning a press conference that's happening at the Cross Insurance Arena in the landing room in Portland immediately following this forum. The press conference is regarding LD 1822, the outlier data privacy bill our associations have been working hard to defeat. It's important that we continue to demonstrate a strong, visible showing of opposition. So we encourage you to join us and bring your colleagues for this brief press conference that is happening at 11 a.m. Over at the Cross Insurance Arena. So hope to see some of you there. And beyond that, thank you all for coming, and we hope that you have a great rest of the day. And thank you to all the candidates again. Thank you.